Sources say the municipal solid waste charging scheme will not go ahead on August 1st as scheduled. The fire chief says some smoke doors were not closed during the deadly fire at New Lucky House in Yau Ma Tei. And G7 finance ministers discussed the use of frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine. Good evening and welcome to TVB News. The government will review the policy direction for the citywide municipal solid waste charging scheme at the Legislative Council tomorrow. Sources say the plan will not go ahead on August 1st as scheduled.
星期一詳細交代。OK， 唔該晒。
Details to be announced Monday, the government said. This are survey results from a 2-month trial run of the solid waste charging scheme at 14 locations found more than half of the participating households and merchants saw no change in the amount of trash they disposed of and recycled. Many noted the scheme is a nuisance to the public. It's understood the government is inclined to shelve the scheme and won't set out a timeline for implementation, meaning the policy will likely be put on the back burner indefinitely. But the government will review other efforts, including the handout of designated garbage bags to households, especially those at public housing estates for free, sources say. Reportedly, an expansion of recycling facilities will also be on the agenda. Some members of the public find it pointless to distribute the trash bags for free. This man said the bags have problems in their quality and sizes. This man said their building gives them free trash bags too. But some buildings have raised the management fees in preparation for the waste charging scheme because of the extra manpower and expenses incurred. At this residential building at Xi'an Court in Qiwenshan, the management fee went up by more than 10% as early as March. Wang Qinping, president of the Hong Kong Federation of Property Management Industry, said if the solid waste charging scheme is shelved, it is likely that most buildings will refund the fees to tenants. Lau Kwok Fan, chairman of the Legislative Council's panel on environmental affairs, said the government should not rush out environmental policies given the various unpredictable factors at play, including the pace of economic recovery in Hong Kong. He also hopes the administration can see the lack of recycling facilities in the community as observed in the scheme's trial period. The Green Earth, meanwhile, is disappointed at the possible policy postponement. Edwin Lau, the Green Group's executive director, said if that happens, people will be under an impression that the government has no commitment to promote waste reduction. And it's even worse if the authorities plan to distribute the designated trash bags for free. Lau urges the government to roll out the waste charging scheme on August 1st as scheduled, but at government buildings and dormitories for civil servants first to show its dedication to environmental causes. Director of Fire Services Andy Yeung told TVB that several smoke doors were not closed during the deadly fire which broke out at New Lucky House in April. The Mosangai reports.
A massive blaze broke out at New Lucky House on Nathan Road last month, killing 5 people and injuring 40. The Fire Services Department earlier said the blaze was caused by flaming objects located on the first floor of the building. A month after the incident, Director of Fire Services Andy Yeung gave an update on the cause of the fire. He said another major factor that led to multiple deaths in the fire was several smoke doors in the building were not shut. Yeung said that would have caused thick smoke to reach up to the top floors, increasing the risk of people fainting or even dying. However, the Fire Services Department had inspected the New Lucky House 2 months before the incident and did not notice any fire safety problems. The officer explained that authorities only inspected shops on the ground floor, adding the department had issued many fire hazard abatement notices to the building after receiving complaints regarding the smoke doors. Meanwhile, Yeung reminded the public to stay indoors or choose another path to escape if they see heavy smoke outside their apartments. He said carbon monoxide can cause people to become unconscious or even cause death by inhaling it for just 2 or 3 minutes. Minus 9, TVB News.
Finance officials from the G7 nations are moving towards an agreement on a U.S. proposal to use frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine. The money will be used to help Ukraine's public finances as its economy struggles to cope with Russia's invasion. But as David Garrett reports, the 2-day conference wrapped up in Italy without total agreement.
US President Joe Biden's administration has already been approved by Congress to seize roughly $5 billion in Russian assets located in America. It's thought there is 60 times that frozen in Europe. More than $300 billion has been seized since Russia invaded Ukraine. So, with Janet Yellen on the shores of Lake Maggiore in Italy for a G7 finance meeting, there was a push for Western allies to follow suit. The most important subject is how Russian frozen assets can support Ukraine. Hosting Italian finance chief Giancarlo Giorgetti said, without giving much away, no exact figures were mentioned. It's not just about how to utilise those assets, he said. European leaders especially are grappling with whether it's right to outright confiscate funds and give the money straight to Ukraine. Progress, but nothing finalised yet, Giorgetti continues. There are technical and legal issues. Ukraine's finance minister joined the G7 finance ministers and central bank heads at their concluding session on Saturday and made this comment.
The proposals you are describing is quite easy to implement. Even if you are talking about utilizing of future proceeds from frozen Russian assets. If there are general agreement of G7 nations, I believe there are no obstacles to implement it.
The ministers have put in the financial framework for a possible announcement when presidents and prime ministers convene in southern Italy in June. The official line is, despite progress, a final decision will rest with G7 leaders, including US President Joe Biden. European countries are concerned such a move could elicit an angry Russian response. Vladimir Putin, who has been visiting Belarus and Uzbekistan in recent days, has already signed a decree allowing the confiscation of the assets of US companies in Russia in a tit-for-tat move. The US says Chinese low-price goods threaten global business and have put heavy tariffs on items like electric cars. Washington used these talks to encourage G7 finance ministers to do much more to curb China's state-backed productions. Yellen did not call for partners to implement similar tariffs, but did ask for a wall of opposition. On imposing their own charges, G7 nations had differing views. In Beijing, the Foreign Ministry said earlier that US claims of overcapacity, accusations that China is stockpiling supply to outweigh demand, is in contrary to the laws of economics, with the US guilty of protectionism. David Garrett, TVB News.
Israeli forces killed more than 30 people in new attacks in the Gaza Strip. This after judges at the top United Nations court ordered Israel to halt its offensive on the southern Gaza city of Rafah, days ahead of peace talks in Cairo. And scuffles between police and protesters erupted in Tel Aviv Saturday after thousands demonstrated against the government, demanding that it bring back the hostages held by Hamas in Gaza. Tracy Furness reports.
Smoke was seen rising on Gaza's skyline Saturday as Israel continues its offensive in the enclave. This as the International Court of Justice Friday ordered Israel to stop its military offensive in the southern Gazan city of Rafah with immediate effect. Speaking from the Peace Palace in The Hague, Judge Nawaf Salam, president of the court, said the situation has deteriorated and the humanitarian situation is now disastrous. In addition, the court demanded Israel allow fact-finders and investigators of United Nations bodies to look into allegations of genocide and to preserve possible evidence. Also Saturday, mounted police and protesters clashed in Tel Aviv as officers used a water cannon to disperse anti-government protesters calling for the release of hostages held in Gaza. Divisions among Israelis have deepened about how the Israeli government has handled the war against Hamas after the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel that killed 1,200 people. Sources have said negotiations between Israel and Hamas, led by mediators Egypt and Qatar and with active US involvement, are due to restart in Cairo soon. But a Hamas official has denied Israeli media reports that talks would resume on Tuesday. This as a US military boat and what looked to be a strip of docking washed up on a beach near the southern Israeli city of Ashdod. The US Central Command said 4 of its vessels supporting humanitarian aid in Gaza were affected by heavy seas, with 2 of them anchoring off the coast of Gaza and another 2 in Israel. American authorities said no injuries were reported and that US personnel did not enter Gaza, adding it is working with the Israeli army to recover the vessels. And Italy's Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, received Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa Saturday at Palazzo Chigi, the country's government seat in Rome. Italy reiterated its support for all ongoing efforts for a sustainable ceasefire, the release of all hostages in the hands of Hamas, and a sharp increase in humanitarian assistance to the people of Gaza. This came a day after Italy announced it will resume funding for the United Nations Palestinian Relief Organization, UNRWA, as part of a €35 million aid package. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
A fire at a hospital in India has killed at least 7 newborns in the capital city, New Delhi. This as India was barely coming to terms with another fire at an amusement park in a different part of the country, which killed at least 27. Most of those victims were children. The hospital blaze broke out late Saturday in the east of the capital. A baby care center caught fire just before midnight. The charge remains no longer resembled a medical facility. The cause is still unknown. 12 babies were saved, but some could not be rescued and died of smoke inhalation. Fire spread to the next-door building. Families gathered outside, searching for loved ones and pleading for information. Earlier on Saturday, at least 27, mostly young people, were killed in a massive fire at a crowded amusement park in Gujarat state in western India. Huge smoke clouds formed and the buildings were razed to the ground. A search is ongoing in the hope of finding survivors under the wreckage. The cause of that outbreak is also being investigated. The owner and the manager of the site are being questioned. And still ahead, the Premier of China and the Prime Minister of Japan arrived in South Korea for a trilateral summit. A fatal traffic accident in Mongkok early today. And foul odor across parts of Shatin because of a pipe malfunction at the district's sewage treatment facility. Welcome back. Premier Li Qiang landed in Seoul today and held separate bilateral talks with South Korean and Japanese leaders this afternoon ahead of a long-suspended trilateral summit. The summit will cover various areas of cooperation as well as regional and international issues in a bid to restore and normalize a trilateral cooperation system among the 3 countries. Danny Zhou has the story.
Premier Li Qiang stepped out his chartered plane and waved to the crowds after arriving at the Seoul airport in Songnam at noon today. He was greeted by a batch of South Korean senior officials and Chinese ambassador to South Korea, Xing Haiming. This year marks the 25th anniversary of China-Japan-South Korea cooperation, and the 9th trilateral summit will be resumed tomorrow after a 4.5-year hiatus due to the COVID-19 pandemic. With economic cooperation as the centerpiece, the summit will be a landmark for restoring mutual trust among the 3 neighboring countries as they expect to promote communication and manage tensions against the backdrop of increased economic and security frictions. In Li's bilateral meeting with South Korea's President Yoon Suk-yeol this afternoon, the 2 sides agreed to bolster cooperation, launch a diplomatic and security dialogue, and resume talks on a free trade agreement. Li stressed that 2 countries should oppose turning economic and trade issues into political or security issues and should work to maintain stable supply chains. Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, who also arrived in Seoul this afternoon, told reporters that Japan is willing to have frank and open discussions while confirming the direction towards a mutually beneficial strategic relationship, as well as constructive and stable China-Japan ties. Japan is also seeking to secure a free trade agreement with China and lift China's ban on Japanese seafood imports. China imposed the ban in response to Japan's decision to release wastewater from the crippled Fukushima nuclear power plant into the ocean. Experts said that though faced with intensified US-China rivalry, Japan and South Korea have to recover and maintain the economic relations with China, as it is their largest trade partner. Meanwhile, the three-way summit will foster understanding and enhance collaboration among the three countries, which is vital for regional peace and prosperity. In the trilateral session scheduled on Monday, the leaders are expected to adopt a joint statement on 6 areas, including personnel exchanges, climate change, trade, health and aging population, technology, and disaster responses. Danny Zhou, TVB News.
Songwriter Richard Sherman, who delighted generations of children with such favorites as It's a Small World and Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, died Saturday at the age of 95. Sherman was one half of famed songwriting team the Sherman Brothers, alongside his late brother Robert. The brothers were lauded as the most prolific composer-lyricists of their era, writing more than 200 songs and garnering 9 Academy Awards, 2 Oscars, and 3 Grammy Awards, writing songs for such children's classics as Mary Poppins and Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Sherman garnered 24 gold and platinum albums over a career spanning decades. He died at a Beverly Hills hospital. The cause was listed as an age-related illness. A crash between a taxi and a motorcycle in Mongkok in the small hours today left 2 people killed and 3 others injured. The fatal victims were the 22-year-old motorcyclist and a 24-year-old female passenger. Paramedics and firefighters tried to carry out emergency treatment for the pair. They were eventually certified dead at hospital. The incident occurred at around 3 a.m. The motorcyclist was driving along Argyle Street towards Tai Kok Tsui and collided with a taxi at the junction of Nathan Road. The cabbie and the passenger on board the taxi were injured, while a 69-year-old passerby sustained cuts on the face by shards from the crash. The Drainage Services Department reported a pipe malfunction at the Sha Tin sewage treatment works. That led to a minor overflow of sludge in the facility and the spread of foul odor across the district. On the social media page, the department said the malfunction happened around midday and urgent repairs and cleanup work have been undertaken. It also apologized for the unpleasant odor and the impact on Sha Tin residents. On Taichung Q Road, around 2 kilometers away from the plant, some residents said they could smell the pungent odor and thought there were burst pipes. John Ho, a former biochemistry associate professor at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, said the chemicals causing the odor might be harmful to the human body. He reminds the public that if they are staying indoors and smell the odor, they should try to keep the premises ventilated by turning on the exhaust fan or other ventilation systems. And that's the news. Thank you for watching.